I'm Pedro Pizarro, President and CEO of Edison International. Thank you for joining us in day one of the National Clean Energy Week virtual policy program. It's good to see the interest in and hear the perspectives on the future of American infrastructure. We heard great panels on everything from improving and expanding the grid to growing our capacity to produce clean energy and add energy storage capabilities to the tremendous innovation underway in these areas. We also heard about the role of electric companies in the energy transition. Carbon emissions from investor-owned utilities are at their lowest level in nearly 40 years, and 40% of our nation's electricity now comes from carbon-free sources. That's great news, but there is a long road ahead, not only for our industry, but across the entire economy. The pace simply cannot happen fast enough. Weather-driven natural disasters are increasing in scale, scope, and overall cost to society. Last year, more than 40% of Americans lived in counties affected by a climate-related disaster. And we know this all too well firsthand in California. Over the past decade, the average number of annual disaster events that cost more than $1 billion in damage has increased by nearly 30% in California. Wildfires are the starkest example. 12 of the 20 largest wildfires in California history have occurred in the last 5 years. And just this month, we experienced a major heat wave that placed the most demand we've ever seen on our grid. Some of the conversations that we're having and will continue to have look at what climate change will mean for society and for our economy and what actions we need to take. Among the most important is meeting the near-term climate commitments we have already set. And this includes the United States' nationally determined contribution goal of 50 to 52% economy-wide GHG emissions reduction by 2030 from 2005 levels. This also includes our statewide commitments, and California's 2030 goal is to reduce GHG emissions 40% below 1990 levels. Missing these targets will make meeting the long-term goal to achieve a net zero economy even more difficult. So what's most concerning is that there is the potential to exacerbate the impacts we are already experiencing. 3 years ago, Southern California Edison ran an analysis of the most affordable way to meet California's climate goals, including a 2045 net zero commitment. The resulting policy paper, we called it Pathway 2045, concluded that the most affordable path is to use 100% carbon-free electricity to power high levels of electrification across the building and transportation sectors. Low-carbon fuels like renewable natural gas and hydrogen are also needed for hard-to-electrify sectors. This is a near-complete transformation of how we source and use energy across all sectors of the economy. Well, how's California doing so far? You look over the last decade or so, and you'll see that the state has reduced its greenhouse gas emissions by about 1% a year. Now, that's pretty good, with the economy growing about 3% a year or so. The state has done well overall. But there's a big issue when you look at the state's ability to meet its future commitments. Last year, we published a policy paper called Mind the Gap. And our analysis showed that in order to meet California's 2030 climate goals, the state would need to quadruple the rate of emissions reduction, starting pretty much now, by going to a 4% a year reduction. That's a big increase from the 1% a year we've had over the last decade. So that illustrates a sense of urgency that we need not only in California, but nationally and globally. Over the past year, it's been great to see more action at the federal level with a real sense of urgency. We've seen the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act become law. And given everything I've described, these laws make a whole lot of sense from an investment perspective as we look to curb GHG emissions and adapt our economy to the extreme weather events we're already facing. Together, these laws have all the ingredients to help increase deployment of renewables and storage while expanding transmission capabilities nationally. And they not only form some of the most significant investments in infrastructure we've seen in decades, but they're also in line with what we at Edison International have been doing and the actions we've seen in our state of California. I was particularly happy to see the used EV credit in the Inflation Reduction Act. We know from our own experience in California that it works. It works. The IRA's EV tax credit is modeled after a program available to customers of Southern California Edison through its pre-owned EV rebate program. In that program at SCE, customers who buy or lease a used electric vehicle can receive a standard rebate of $1,000 regardless of income. But certain income-qualified customers can receive $4,000. And this rebate is an important way to extend the benefits of the clean energy transition to a broader group of customers who have traditionally had limited access to electric vehicles. Income-qualified customers represent 27% of those receiving the rebate, and they have received 60% of the total amount of credits issued. That's progress. Looking more broadly, I am very proud to say that Southern California Edison has the country's largest utility-based programs for supporting electric vehicle charging. SCE's Charge Ready programs will invest nearly $800 million to expand vehicle charging infrastructure for both passenger vehicles and for larger trucks, buses, and off-road industrial equipment. Now, building electrification is another significant opportunity and an important lever in achieving climate goals. Decarbonizing California's buildings will cost the state about $19 billion. Available state and federal funding are insufficient to close this multi-billion-dollar heat pump gap. To help meet that gap, Southern California Edison has proposed to invest over $670 million to support the growth of building electrification over a 4-year period. And if this program is approved, the scale will still not be enough to meet the levels needed to achieve interim climate goals, but it's an important first step. It's progress. We will still need to do more. I know that with all of this investment, there's a lot of concern around affordability overall. There is good news on that, though. And Edison's study of economy-wide electrification here in California found that although electric bills will be higher, our customers' total cost across all forms of energy, I'm talking about electric plus natural gas plus gasoline, will go down by 1/3 in real terms through 2045. And that is because of the greater efficiency of electric technologies. So that means that there's economic value to be captured after you make all the initial investments. We are also laser focused on extending the benefits of the clean energy transition to our most vulnerable customers. A substantial portion of SCE's electrification programs support our communities that face disproportionate effects from climate change and other environmental hazards. Southern California has, again, a disproportionately large percentage of customers living in these very vulnerable communities compared to the state as a whole. These programs will improve air quality in our most polluted areas by reducing air emissions on our transportation corridors and improving indoor air quality. SCE is also focused on expanding access to clean energy technologies through incentives and providing economic opportunities to our underrepresented community members. This clean energy transition cannot succeed without everyone on board. Well, in addition to the work that Southern California Edison is doing to help California achieve its 2045 greenhouse gas goals, at Edison International, we also have an energy advisory subsidiary called Edison Energy, and it is equally engaged in the transition to a clean energy future. In just the last 5 years, Edison Energy has expanded to now serve 22 out of the Fortune 100, and it's providing global energy and sustainability advisory, management, and data reporting services for clients worldwide. One example of Edison Energy's work is that they recently established something called the Accelerate program. And this flexible funding program focuses on simplifying projects that create carbon savings by delivering them as a service and reducing risk to customers who will pay only for measured and verified savings. Edison Energy also recently established a $50 million fund for decarbonization efforts aimed at suppliers within the auto industry. The goal here is to make progress towards decarbonizing the commercial, industrial, and institutional markets using flexible funding structures. Well, there's a whole lot of progress happening to curb climate change. The harsh reality is that we are already seeing impacts in our home state of California and globally, and more change is inevitable. So finding ways to adapt, not just mitigate, but to adapt is no longer a choice. It's imperative for our society. Southern California Edison has already invested a significant amount in near-term climate adaptation measures focused on wildfire prevention. To reduce the risk of SCE equipment sparking a wildfire, the company is investing across a number of adaptation measures. And one example is that SCE has replaced more than 3,500 of its 10,000 miles of overhead distribution power lines in high fire risk areas with covered conductor in a little more than 3.5 years. Covered conductor prevents sparks from occurring if debris like tree branches falls into wires during a windstorm or other event. With actions like these, SCE estimates that it has already reduced the probability of losses from catastrophic wildfires associated with SCE's infrastructure by 65 to 70% compared to pre-2018 levels. That's a lot of risk reduction and a lot of protection for our communities. When looking out over the long term, I am encouraged by what we've heard here today and the focus on proactive planning. The energy industry, in particular, must begin now to incorporate projected climate conditions rather than just relying on historical data into our electric system planning. Southern California Edison recently became the first California investor-owned utility to conduct a Climate Adaptation and Vulnerability Assessment, or CAVA. This CAVA identified potential impacts to our electric system. We could see a 2 to 3 foot projected average sea level rise by 2050. And that'll put infrastructure in some coastal areas at very high risk of flooding. Our service area could be up to 7 times more likely to experience temperatures as hot as or hotter than the historical 99th percentile temperature. And as I mentioned, we got a bit of a taste of that earlier this month. Such recurring extreme heat could reduce line capacity by 10 to 20%. Peak load could increase significantly, and equipment will not cool overnight, which would further reduce capacity and useful life for some of our operating equipment pieces. More broadly, within the energy sector, Edison was proud to be a founding member of the Electric Power Research Institute's Climate Ready initiative. This 3-year resilience and adaptation initiative, that's the READY, is creating an industry-wide framework for electric system adaptation and resilience decisions and investments. Support and collaboration among all stakeholders are essential if we are to transition to a clean energy economy in a way that is reliable and affordable for all of our customers. Well, there's a lot to do, but I am encouraged by the conversations that are taking place. We're also working very hard to share our story and inspire and help others to take similar big, bold actions. A clean energy future is achievable and affordable if we electrify much of the economy. Climate change is not just something that's decades away. It's here already. We're all experiencing it. So we are delighted to continue these important conversations tomorrow on the second day of this virtual program. We are going to explore some of the major tax and finance issues facing the clean energy industry, as well as efforts to reduce emissions in hard to decarbonize sectors. We are going to need the right policies and incentives to support the transition, while equity and affordability have to be top of mind on the road ahead. But if we all work together, and I know we will, I believe we have the tools, the people, and the commitment to take on these enormous challenges. And all of this while continuing to safely provide reliable and affordable electricity for all of our customers and communities. Well, thank you, and I hope you enjoyed today and have a great time with great conversations tomorrow.